Well, hello there. Welcome to the Obi Thorn Alliance. And in today's video, we're doing a review for The Twisters. Like and subscribe. Stick around to find out what we think about it.
Twisters. Well, it's a sequel to the original movie Twister, which I believe came out in 1996. I believe I've seen bits of it. I remember the barn roof ripping off and cows flying. Have you seen the film?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, so we're kind of going into this blind. Luckily, this movie doesn't have any reoccurring characters or anything carrying on. I think the only thing is that it's one about twisters, and two, it's, I think, set in Oklahoma. They both might be. So it's kind of interesting how that works. So this movie is directed by Lee Isaac Chung. Neither of us were familiar with his work. He was from Korean descent, born in Denver in America, and his previous works we hadn't heard of. He won a couple of awards at the Cannes Film Festival, but ultimately pretty new for us. Stars Glen Powell, what movies have we seen Glen Powell in this year?
Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah, we also saw him in The Hitman. Have you seen that yet?
No.
I saw it. I really liked it. One of the rare Netflix films that I think does well. And then he's also in Anyone But You, which is firmly in my top 10 movies of the year, which I thoroughly enjoyed. We also have Daisy Edgar-Jones. I didn't recognize her. I hadn't seen her in anything. Said she was in Cold Feet, Where the Crawdads Sing, and I think it was War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
So you said you kind of recognized her face?
I think so, but it's been a while since I've seen that movie.
Yeah, so British actor, puts on a decent accent for a British person pretending to be American. So what's the premise of this film?
A disaster film, and its main characters trying to solve how do we get rid of these twisters, and then she gets some help from a YouTuber, a larrikin, and then they solve the problem, and then it kind of starts from there.
Yeah, so we have them. It starts off with the main character. She's at university doing her research. Her and her friends, they're trying to win a grant. She believes that she can stop twisters by reducing the humidity, by basically putting something in there. She said it was similar to stuff that's found in diapers. They mispredict the strength or the category of the cyclone. Most of her friends die. She survives. The trauma through that she still continues to be a meteorologist, but she kind of becomes shut off and, has PTSD from that. One of her friends who survives says, hey, I've got this new company. We're going to research cyclones, twisters, tornadoes, whatever you want to call them, and we're going to try and use that information to maybe prevent them. So she's easily convinced. She goes on the journey, finds out there's actually a darker motive to that, and as you said, comes in contact with Glen Powell, the heartthrob of this movie, who's a YouTube storm chaser, which has a huge following, but he's also a lot smarter than he looks, being a meteorologist himself. And the movie follows their journey of being caught in twisters, trying to learn how to prevent them, and then also dealing with this kind of sinister other motive that's going on. So the movie has a $200 million budget. We don't know if it made it back yet because it's actually not released in America yet. Yeah. But from all reports, it's done very well globally in countries that it's premiered in. You saw it on the weekend and you said it was the busiest movie you've seen all year.
Yeah.
Which when I saw it, it was fairly busy too, and it was a weekday. You went on a Sunday, so it's going to be a bit busier. So people are flocking to this movie just by voting with their feet from what we've seen. So let's see if the money adds up on that. 200 million budget's probably not too hard to try and make back. It could be done. What else? We learnt that in 2020 they were possibly going to make this movie earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what did we find out about that?
They were trying to make it into a reboot.
Yeah, so they've gone instead rejected that idea and gone with a sequel which falls in the world of Twisters, but not any reoccurring characters. So it has a 29-track album of original songs that accompany this, which is pretty cool because most movies don't get big soundtracks. I believe this was a feature of the original Twisters that had a killer soundtrack. So it was quite cool. Being not a fan of country, I actually enjoyed it. I thought it accompanied it pretty well. And as I said, I don't listen to country, but when I do hear it, I don't mind it. So I thought it was quite good. Metacritic gave it 7.1 out of 10, and Rotten Tomatoes critics have given it 79%. So let's see where our ratings stack up against that.
Yeah.
What do you give the plot, Jacob?
For me, it gets a 6. It's a decent plot, but I found it very convenient. I predicted something was going to happen from the start, and it kind of did. I guess this is kind of a hard one because you're not going to see this film for the plot. You're going for the experience and the action of seeing the twisters. But for me, I found it very boring. It's kind of hard because the critical brain was kind of thinking, oh, I'm not enjoying this for its plot, but my viewer brain was kind of going, I want to get to next action scene. So that's why it gets a 6. It doesn't do anything special, but gets to the next scene.
I gave the plot a 5 just because it is a very basic premise. It really doesn't have much point. I am glad it didn't go in a direction of trying to be all about global warming, and it also didn't have some kind of political agenda or some villain that's trying to weaponize twisters. So I'm glad it didn't go that path, but it was a pretty simple plot that we kind of got to know the characters, but it wasn't characters we particularly cared about. There wasn't really any follow-on or repercussions of it, and in terms of getting the movie to think, ultimately, I know no more about twisters now than what I did entering this film. Twisters are an unknown kind of natural phenomenon, so yeah, the plot didn't really suffice that. So it was okay. It was good for what it was, but I'm not going to give it a 10 for a basic movie about a natural disaster. Unlike maybe a film where people were caught in like a tsunami and had to escape, that could get a higher ranking, but this really wasn't about that. They were putting themselves purposely in harm's danger, and apparently they have once in a generation cyclones on a daily basis in Oklahoma apparently, which doesn't make sense to me. So, but it's a movie. What do you give the acting?
For me, this gets a 5. Not really much acting required for this movie. And they did a decent job, but no one's going to win an Oscar from this movie. There is some emotional moments, but for me it was hard to care about those emotional moments because you were meant to care about the friends that we didn't spend that much time with, and it was hard to care about them because they weren't in the movie for that much time, so the acting did its job.
I gave the acting a 7. There wasn't a whole lot required. It wasn't really an action film either, so they weren't, like climbing buildings or trying to save people too often. But I actually enjoyed Glen Powell's character most of all. I think he was charismatic, he was funny. I think he embodied the person that he was trying to portray, and that's kind of why I gave it that mark. I actually thought his performance was really good, and I know you can say, well, it's not Oscar worthy, but that's what the role needed, and he did it well. So I think credit's due where it is due. So what did you give the presentation of the experience?
This gets a 10. This is what you're coming to see the movie for, the twisters and seeing people get sucked into them, and you do get to see that happen. I kind of wish you got to see a bit more. I was kind of hoping for... I think this would have made the movie even better if you got to see at least one of the main characters dying. I was kind of hoping for one moment when it was going to happen, but unfortunately it doesn't happen. But it was awesome. I think with the experience, this is the sort of movie that you need to go to the cinema for. There might be a better movie like Quiet Place 1 might have better acting and a better plot. But because it's quiet, it's probably better watching at home. What with this movie, you need to see at the cinema. So this is why the experience gets a 10.
I gave the experience a 9.5. Very similar to Jacob. I liked it. I thought it was I think it needed to be seen at the cinemas. I think if I watched it at home, I may have kind of been distracted and not fully immersed myself in the film. Obviously, the big sounds and the roaring of the twister and the things flying. I guess that the big screen definitely makes that a worthwhile experience. And yeah, I enjoyed it for a movie that was about a simple concept of twisters. The way they presented it got me engaged. So the presentation was definitely a highlight of the film. What do you give the ending to this film?
For me, it gets a 5. I was kind of hoping for something more exciting, but it does end in a way where you want there to be a sequel, but it kind of ends in a way that it kind of felt like a love story as well. It does a fine ending, but not anything that you go, oh, you got that. That was a superb ending. So it's kind of a sort of ending that you go, it was okay. Didn't when I left the cinema, I wasn't memorized and going, I'll remember that ending. It's in the middle, 5.
I gave the ending a 6. Basically, being a movie about a natural occurring phenomenon, it was like there really is no solid ending to it. It's not like they put an end to all twisters and they'll never happen again. So there was really no, I don't know how you end this film, but at its core it did have that love story going through it. So I do like the way they ended that. I thought the last scene was actually really, really funny. So that's why I'm giving the ending a 6, because I think it ended on a positive note and a laugh. So I did like how it ended. But yeah, there's not really too much you can do with that. They're not going to, there wasn't really a villain per se, and yeah, they're not going to suddenly come up with some miracle cure to stop cyclones or like twisters, but they kind of do, but I don't think they could pursue it. They'd be a bit silly. Originality of this film?
This gets a 7. I actually really liked seeing how mad people would endeavor to find twisters, and I know there's probably documentaries that you can watch, but for me this was a really original idea to see in a movie, because we live in Australia, so for us it was really original idea in a disaster movie. So for me that was kind of a cool concept to see, because normally I couldn't think of anything worse to see for myself to actually want to hunt them. So that was quite a unique concept, and also that they actually didn't make it like global warming or have a message into it. It was just they're twisters and humans want to hunt them. So that was quite a unique concept for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I gave the originally a 7.5. One, I like what Jacob mentioned about how they didn't just go for the cheap kind of connection of global warming or politics. I liked that there wasn't a hidden message behind it. Thought it was original in the sense of, well, at first it's like, how do you make a film about twisters without it being these people caught in this storm, and how do they get out of it? Like, they could have went that route, but the fact that they found it about meteorologists, storm chasers, trying to understand how twisters work, I thought that was really clever. Did they nail it? Not really, but it was entertaining enough, and I thought it was a better idea than what I probably would have came up with. So I enjoyed it. I actually think the best part was tying in Glen Powell's character with the YouTube and being famous on social media, because that is a thing. Storm chasers, people are interested in that. People get obsessed with YouTube. We're making YouTube content right now. So I think the way they did that and the live streaming of it, it was very clever. So I think that was original. I also really liked the fact that kind of the ending scene was like people trying to get away from this twister, and they went into a movie theater, which I think was cool. Watching it in a theater, it's like a way of them making think like, oh, is there a storm going on outside? Could you be caught in a twister? So I thought that was ever an original touch to it. So what do you give the appeal of this film?
For me, it gets an 8. I think I could solidly recommend a lot of people to this movie. I think it definitely, a lot of people definitely want to see this movie, and I think that's why a lot of people want to see this movie, because the plot, it might not be excellent or make you think or anything, but really why it would appeal to people is because of seeing the twisters. The twisters are kind of more the main character, and that's what appeals to a lot of people. Not everyone would want to see this movie, but it is a well-made movie for disaster folk.
Yeah, I gave it an 8 as well. I think I could easily say that it would appeal to a wide range of people, because it's fictional, it's not too serious, it's not long, it's a bit of an easy watch, it's got some pretty characters in it, it's got some cool actions. I think it ticks off a lot of boxes for people, long as they go into the expectation that this is not a masterpiece.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
For the sake of entertainment, and you should be entertained by this. So that's why I give it an 8. How recommendable is this film?
This gets a 9. I think if I was in a room with 10 other people, I could convince quite a lot of people to watch this movie. There's always one person that would be like, oh, I'm not going to watch it, but I think I could sell quite a lot of people. It has The plot's the main thing that I've kept mentioning, but I think that's the weakest element. But the acting's fine. It's very entertaining. And I think it's well worth watching if you haven't got anything to watch at the moment.
I gave the recommendability an 8.5. I think those that like action films will get something from it, and those that are kind of open to new experiences will enjoy it. It's not a thinker. It's not full of sci-fi. It does have a bit of science in it, so you know it might appeal to the intellectual people out there. So I think it ticks a lot of boxes. I think even like maybe not young kids, they might get bored of it, but teenagers or kids from 10 onwards could watch this and be like, oh wow, like they see the scenes and the action. So it's appealing to a lot of people, so I would recommend it too a lot and feel confident they would getting what they're expecting. So how rewatchable is this film?
This definitely gets an 8. I think probably just watching the disaster moments again. Obviously, it's not going to be the same experience because you're watching at home. Obviously, the first time, I think the theatre will always make it that #1 best time. But it'll still be awesome watching it at home. Just not the X Factor moment from watching it the first time. Rewatchability, definitely entertaining to watch it at home, but not the same.
I'm going to give it an 8 as well, because it's not one of those movies where it's like, oh, once you see the plot twist, you can't rewatch it again. There's not really much of a plot twist, if any. So I would rewatch it just to see the action and destruction and see if there's anything I missed the first time around, or purely just something you could put on and be like, well, what do you want to watch tonight? Oh, I don't mind, your choice. Or we'll put this on because it's like, we know it's okay. So yeah, I think it's pretty rewatchable. So what's your final score, Jacob?
Out of 100%, I gave it a 72.5%. And for a disaster movie that the plot, it's okay, the acting's, it gets quite a fantastic score. I was hesitant going into this movie, and I think that's a well-deserved score that got definitely worth going to the movies to see this movie. I think you'll have a fantastic time. You'll be entertained. You'll be on the edge of your seat for the characters, hoping they make it. And who knows, maybe some of them don't, but definitely worth watching at the movies.
Yeah, great score. So mine just pulled in a fraction higher at 74%. I'll be very intrigued to see how this movie does at the box office, whether it is a success and makes its money back in some. We've had a couple of billion-dollar movies so far this year. I don't know if it'll quite get there, but I think if it was to make $500 million, $500 million, there's probably an appetite to make a sequel. And given the star power of Glen Powell, they probably could do it. I don't know where they go. Do they follow this route of trying to get grants to stop twisters, or do they go to another country or something? I don't know, but I think if it makes that kind of money, I think they might remake it because it seems pretty cost effective and there's an appetite for it. So I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for watching. As always, comment down your thoughts if you liked it or not. Like and subscribe, and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.